My name is Clarissa. I had just pulled into the driveway after the longest night of my life. My daughter Emery had been rushed to the ER after suffering a severe allergic reaction to a dog bite at school. Her tiny hand clutched mine the entire time, her body swollen and trembling. I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel, watching her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her face was pale lips, chapped hair matted with sweat. But she was alive. That was the only thing I could hold on to. As I helped her up the porch steps and unlocked the door, a familiar bitter voice sliced through the quiet. "Pay Trevor's rent or get out," my mother barked from the living room. Her arms crossed, perfume sharp in the air. She stood by the fireplace like a judge already set on her verdict. I blinked, disoriented. What I said. "Mom, Emery was in the ER." I motioned to my daughter, whose hospital bracelet still hung from her wrist. "I don't care about that drama," she snapped. "Trevor needs help, and you're working full time. You're going to pay it." I stepped forward, gently guiding Emery to the couch, but she hesitated, her eyes wide, sensing the danger before I did. "Mom, I can't," I said quietly. "I've got nothing left. Her medication, the bills." "Excuses," my mother hissed, her voice climbing higher. "You're selfish, always have been, living on your high horse while your brother suffers." Before I could respond, I heard heavy boots behind me. My father, silent until now, stepped into view. His face was blank, unreadable. I instinctively shielded Emery. He stared at me for a moment, then suddenly his hand cracked across my cheek. The blow was so hard it threw me off balance. My shoulder hit the doorway, then I slid to the floor. My head spun, my mouth filled with blood. Emery screamed, "Mom!" She cried, her voice raw with panic. I looked up, dazed. My father stood over me, sneering. "Maybe now you'll obey." I tasted blood and fear, but also something else, something rising. That moment, the scream of my child, the copper taste in my mouth, the smug look on his face, something broke in me, or maybe something awakened. I realized they would rather see me on the ground bleeding than give up control. They didn't care about Emery. They didn't care that we had just spent the night terrified in a hospital room. All they cared about was obedient submission, keeping their hold on me. But they had no idea what I was going to do next. I stood up, slow but steady, wiping my mouth with the back of my sleeve. Emery was frozen on the couch, clutching her stuffed elephant. She looked at me not just with fear, but with expectation. She needed me to say something, to do something, anything. My mother scoffed. "You better think long and hard before you make a decision you'll regret." I didn't answer. I just looked at Emery, then back at them. And I made my decision. We left that night. I packed Emery's pajamas and her favorite blanket. I left behind dinner on the stove and the stack of unpaid bills. I didn't even change out of my scrubs. I drove to a nearby motel, my hands trembling the whole time. Emery fell asleep curled up next to me, her little fingers still clenched around my sleeve like she was afraid I'd disappear. I lay awake, listening to the buzz of the neon sign outside our window, the hum of the air conditioning my daughter's breathing. I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself over and over again until I started to believe it. They don't own me. They can't hurt me anymore. They don't get to decide who I am or what kind of life I give my daughter. They will never lay a hand on me again. And they will never again make my child scream out of fear. Never. The next morning, I sat on the edge of the motel bed, sipping the weakest coffee I'd ever had from a styrofoam cup. Emery was still asleep, curled under the scratchy motel blanket, her elephant tucked beneath her chin. Her breathing was steadier now, more peaceful than it had been in days. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead and stared at the sunlight leaking through the plastic blinds. We weren't safe yet, but we were away. I got dressed and called into the clinic where I worked. I lied, said we had a medical emergency. Technically, it wasn't a lie. I didn't go into details. I told them I'd be back the next day. I had one day to think, to figure things out, to decide whether I'd keep surviving or start fighting. By the time we got home that evening, home being a duplex, I rented on the edge of town, I found 4 messages taped to my front door. Each one was in my mother's handwriting. You're turning your back on your family. Trevor is your brother. He would do it for you. You're choosing strangers over blood. Pay the rent or don't come around again. I crumpled them and stuffed them in the trash. That night, while Emery colored at the coffee table, I sat beside her and watched. She was quiet, too quiet for a kid who usually hummed her favorite songs and asked a million questions about bugs or clouds or how pancakes rise. I didn't press her. I let her color in silence. Then she slid a paper across the table toward me. I drew you, she said softly. I smiled, picking it up. My smile disappeared. It was a picture of me on the ground next to the doorway. Red lines spilled from my mouth. Her elephant was lying beside me. Standing nearby were 2 tall figures, one with a scowl, one pointing. And in the corner, a small stick figure Emery tears drawn in blue crayons streaming down her face. The rug, the couch, the doorway, every detail in the drawing matched our living room. I swallowed hard, my throat burning. Are they going to come back? She asked. Her voice was tiny, careful. I folded the drawing slowly and placed it on the counter. Not if I can help it, I whispered. That night I didn't sleep. I just sat at the table with Emery's drawing beside me and stared out the window. The street was quiet, but I could still hear my father's voice, still feel the sting, still taste the blood. By morning I had made up my mind. I pulled out the old file folder I had kept in the bottom drawer of my dresser, the one that held the deed to my grandparents' house. Years ago, after they died, my mother had begged me to help her keep the house from going into probate. She said it had to be in someone's name, someone with good credit. I had agreed. At the time, I thought I was helping my family. So the house was transferred into an LLC under my name. She promised she'd take care of everything, that I wouldn't be involved. For years, I never checked it, never thought about it. I had assumed the house was theirs now emotionally and legally. But legally, it was still mine. I logged into the county assessor's site and typed in the parcel number. My name was still on the title. No rental agreements, no lease, no documentation of occupancy. They were living there for free, under my name, for nearly a year. I stared at the screen, hands shaking. They called me selfish, said I didn't care. But I had paid Trevor's tuition for 2 semesters. I had paid for his car to be fixed after he wrecked it during a late-night joyride. I bought groceries for that house at least once a month. I even helped cover my father's prescription copays last year when he couldn't afford them. Still, it was never enough. If I said no, I was the villain. If I hesitated, I was ungrateful. They never thanked me. Not once. That afternoon, I picked up Emery from school. We stopped for ice cream on the way home. She smiled a little more than she had the night before. I let her get sprinkles. When we got home, I saw it. A small envelope wedged into the crack of my front door. I opened it slowly. Inside was a check, signed by my mother, for $100. In the memo line it read, Trevor's March rent. I laughed, the kind of bitter, hollow laugh that comes from somewhere deep. That night as Emery slept, I pulled up my bank account. There had been strange activity lately, small withdrawals I hadn't remembered authorizing. I opened a statement, then another. It was all there. They had linked an old shared account from years ago, one we used briefly when we tried to start a small family business that never happened. I had forgotten to close it. They hadn't. $300 here, $250 there, even a $1,000 transfer 6 months ago. I called the bank. They confirmed the transfers, the names, the routing numbers. The money had gone to Trevor, and to a crypto wallet I didn't recognize. I hung up. I sat still for a long time. I had spent so much of my life trying to keep peace, trying to be the daughter who helped, the daughter who said yes, the daughter who didn't cause trouble. Even when it hurt, even when it meant going without, even when it meant my daughter didn't get what she needed. I wasn't going to be that daughter anymore. The next morning, I filed a report with my bank. I printed the transfers, I highlighted them, I made copies. I organized everything into a folder labeled proof. I took pictures of my face, the faint bruise where his hand had landed, the dried blood at the corner of my mouth I hadn't noticed until hours later. I took a photo of Emery's drawing. I didn't know if it counted as evidence, but it mattered. I drove to the sheriff's department and asked to speak with someone about filing a restraining order. The deputy was patient calm. He asked questions, took notes, listened. "You're doing the right thing," he said, sliding the paperwork toward me. I filled out every line: name, address, relationship, history. Then I signed. It was the first time I had ever signed something that felt like freedom. When I got home, Emery was on the couch drawing again. This time she looked up and smiled. "Can we paint my room pink one day?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "One day soon." That night, after Emery had fallen asleep with her stuffed elephant curled beneath her arm, I sat alone in the kitchen, flipping through the folder labeled proof. It was thicker now: bank statements, printed screenshots of transactions. I never authorized emails from my mother demanding money, with subject lines like "family first" and "do the right thing." I kept everything. I labeled every document with dates and descriptions in neat handwriting. If they ever came after me again, I wanted to be ready. I reopened the county website and stared at the property listing for my grandparents' house, the one my parents had turned into their kingdom of guilt and control, the one they now lived in without paying a cent. It was mine, still legally mine, and it had been 8 months since any record of utilities being paid under their names. My name was listed as the property owner. Any liability fell on me. I opened the messages again, the one from my mother sent late at night after the slap. "You need to take care of your brother. We raised you. Don't forget that. He's family. You owe us." And another one shorter, from my father. "If you ever speak to the cops, remember who bought your first car?" The old me would have cried. This version of me, I screenshotted everything. I reached out to a local family attorney, someone a nurse friend at the vet clinic recommended after her own custody battle. The receptionist scheduled me for a free consultation the next afternoon. "Bring any evidence you have," she said over the phone. "Photos, documents, messages, anything that shows abuse or coercion." "I have plenty," I said. The next morning, I dropped Emery off at school and drove to the attorney's office. My palms were sweating as I stepped into the small building tucked behind a strip mall, but I didn't turn back. I couldn't. Not now. The lawyer, Ms. Jackson, was calm, methodical, and didn't flinch once as I showed her the documents. "You've done your homework?" she said, flipping through the file. "This is enough to build a case. A case for what restraining order? Civil action, financial reimbursement, even eviction if you're ready for that." "Eviction," I repeated. She turned the monitor toward me and pulled up the property's legal records. "You're the owner. They haven't paid rent. They've taken money from your account. That's trespassing. That's theft. That's grounds for removal." I looked at the screen. My name, my address. They're lies. I imagined them packing their things, not by choice, not by guilt, but because the law said they had to. What would that process look like, I asked. "It starts with a notice, then paperwork, then court. But we can serve them within a week if you want to move fast." I nodded slowly. I want to move fast. That night I received a message from Elaine, my neighbor from the motel, who had seen me limping down the hallway with Emery the night we left. She was in her 70s, lived alone with her tabby cat, and had always kept to herself. But the message was short and direct. "You okay?" I heard yelling. "I have footage." From the hallway cam. I felt my heart stutter. I messaged back. "Footage of what?" She sent a file. I hesitated, then pressed play. The hallway was dim, grainy, but clear enough. It showed my father stepping into the frame. Then the flash of his hand. The sound of it echoed even in the low-quality audio. My body stumbled into view, and I dropped out of frame. A small scream followed. High, sharp. Emery's voice. I paused the video. My hands clenched around the phone. I didn't cry. I saved the file, transferred it to a secure drive, then backed it up twice. The next day, Ms. Jackson helped me file for a temporary restraining order. We attached the video, the texts, the emails, the banking records, and a signed declaration from Elaine confirming the incident and offering the footage if needed. "Do you want to proceed with eviction as well?" she asked. I hesitated. Then I thought of Emery's drawing, The one she'd made with my body on the floor and her tears in blue crayon. Yes, I said. I do. We drafted the paperwork. I didn't tell anyone. Not my coworkers, not even Emery. I went to work. I helped dogs and cats through surgeries and vaccinations. I smiled at owners and cleaned up accidents in exam rooms. Then I came home and documented every phone call, every knock on my door, every envelope shoved into my mailbox in shaky handwriting with phrases like, "Don't do this to us and you'll ruin everything." I recorded my own voice one night, just in case, describing what they'd said, what they'd done, what they kept demanding. I didn't know if I'd ever need it, but I felt stronger knowing it existed. That weekend, I sat with Emery in the living room. She was watching cartoons, her elephant tucked beneath one arm, her small legs swinging off the couch. I pulled out her drawing from the kitchen drawer and placed it on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a paw print. She looked up curious. "Why are you putting that there?" she asked. "Because it's real," I said softly. "And because it's not going to happen again." She nodded once, then went back to coloring. It all happened faster than I thought it would. 3 days after filing, a deputy served the restraining order at my parents' house. I wasn't there, but Ms. Jackson forwarded me the report. According to the officer, my mother had cried on the porch, clutching her chest and shouting, "She's trying to destroy us," while my father stood silent, jaw clenched, arms crossed. Trevor wasn't home. I imagined them standing there in that house, my house, acting like they were the victims. But the truth was now on paper, signed, sealed, legal. The eviction notice followed 2 days later, and then came the storm. It started with the messages, dozens of them, voicemails, texts, even emails from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. My uncle from Tulsa, a second cousin I barely remembered. "What's going on with your parents? Why are they being kicked out? You really called the cops on your dad?" Some of them didn't even bother to ask. They just judged. "Family doesn't turn on family. You could have handled this quietly. You're better than this." I ignored most of it. I only responded once. I attached screenshots, the video, the bank statements, the withdrawal logs. I added a simple line, "This is what they did. I did what I had to do." A few people apologized. A few never responded. That was fine. I didn't need them. The day they showed up at my duplex, I knew something was coming. I had just gotten home from work, still in my scrubs, hair pulled into a tired ponytail. Emery was inside working on a puzzle on the rug. I heard the knock before I even took my keys out of the lock. It wasn't a polite knock. It was loud, heavy, demanding. I opened the door a crack, heart pounding. My mother stood on the porch in a long gray coat. Her makeup smudged, her voice trembling with rage. My father stood a few feet back, his arms crossed, flanked by Trevor. "We're not leaving without what's ours," she said, stepping forward. "You're trespassing," I said quietly, blocking the doorway. "That house is our home," she hissed. "Your grandmother gave it to us." "No," I said. "She asked me to protect it, and I failed to do that for too long." Trevor scoffed. "She's really going through with this. Unreal. You stole from me," I said. "And you assaulted me." My father's lip curled. "You deserved it. That was it." I slammed the door shut and called the police. By the time they arrived, my parents were in the backyard trying to open the gate. Emery sat on the couch holding her elephant tighter than ever, her eyes wide with silent panic. The officers calmly escorted them off the property. I handed over a copy of the restraining order. The officer nodded and turned to my mother. "If you return to this property again, ma'am, you will be arrested. You're siding with a liar," she shouted. "A disgraceful daughter." "No," I said from the doorway. "Just a mother protecting her child." As they walked away, Trevor muttered something under his breath. I didn't catch it. I didn't care. I hugged Emery that night until she fell asleep in my arms. Her fingers didn't unclench for a long time. 2 days later, the official court date for the eviction hearing came. I sat in a wooden chair in the courtroom, knees, steady hands folded over my lap. Ms. Jackson sat beside me. My parents entered with a different lawyer, someone they found last minute, probably a friend of a cousin. He tried to argue emotional hardship, familial history, and implied verbal agreements. Ms. Jackson stayed calm. She presented the video, the withdrawal logs, the property deed, the restraining order, the photos, the timeline. The judge didn't take long. Eviction is granted. 30 days to vacate. I exhaled. They didn't look at me as they left the courtroom. Back home, Emery made a new drawing. It was us, just the two of us, standing in front of a small yellow house with a garden and a tree with purple flowers. She'd drawn the sun bigger than usual, and the elephant stood between us, smiling. I taped that drawing to the fridge next to the first one. On the morning of the final move out, I drove past the house slowly. I didn't stop, but I saw them, boxes piled on the lawn, Trevor shouting at a mover, my mother sitting on the porch with her head in her hands. I didn't feel triumph. I felt clarity. Later that day, I picked up Emery from school and drove to the vet clinic to drop off some paperwork. My boss, Dr. Kumar, stopped me in the hallway. "You okay?" he asked. "I am now," I said. He nodded. "You know we've got an opening at the new clinic across town. Better pay. Closer to where you're moving, right?" I blinked. "How did you—" He smiled. "Elaine called. Said you were finding your way back. That you were strong." Elaine. Of course, I accepted the offer 2 days later. The move happened in one weekend. A rental house just 15 minutes from Emery's school. Nothing fancy. One story. A fenced yard. A small porch with chipped paint and room for flower pots. We painted Emery's room pink. We bought a new rug together. We hung her artwork on the wall. On the first night in the new house, she curled up beside me and whispered, "We're safe now, right?" I kissed the top of her head. "Yes," I said. "We really are." The house was quiet that evening. Emery had gone to bed early, tired from her first full day at the new school. I sat alone in the kitchen, sipping lukewarm tea, the moving boxes still piled in the hallway. A soft breeze drifted through the open window, carrying in the scent of the lavender bush planted just outside the porch. It wasn't much, but it smelled like peace. On the counter sat the file folder. I had kept everything organized: the restraining order, eviction papers, transaction receipts, even a printout of Elaine's video. Everything in one place. I didn't know if I'd ever need it again, but part of me felt safer knowing it was there. My phone buzzed. A notification from the security camera app. Motion detected at the old property. I opened it. The timestamp was just minutes ago. It was Trevor. He was standing at the edge of the porch pacing. He pulled out his phone, dialed, and began shouting into it. I couldn't hear the words, but I recognized the posture, the anger, the chaos. Then I saw my mother step into view. She had bags under her eyes. Her hair was pinned up sloppily. She didn't yell. She just stood there, rubbing her temples. I closed the app, turned off the notifications. That house wasn't mine anymore, not really. Not emotionally. It was just a place. A chapter I had ended. That weekend, Emery and I went grocery shopping. She helped pick out fruit and push the small cart with wobbly wheels. She was lighter now, smiled more, asked if we could bake muffins again. She didn't flinch when people spoke loudly nearby. She even waved at the cashier. We came home and baked blueberry muffins. She spilled flour on the floor and giggled, covering her mouth like it was the most daring thing she'd ever done. Later that night, I sat on the couch folding laundry while she colored beside me. She held up a picture. It was simple. 2 stick figures holding hands in front of a small house, a sun, a purple bush, an elephant with a heart drawn above it. "Benny's not scared anymore," she said. I looked at her. "Neither am I," I replied. Monday morning, I drove her to school. As she hopped out of the car, she looked back and said, "I'll draw you something new today. Something happy." I smiled. "I can't wait to see it." That same afternoon, I stopped by the county records office to drop off some papers related to the LLC transfer. The clerk greeted me with a warm nod and asked how everything had gone. I told her the eviction was finalized, that things were settling. She printed out a final copy of the ownership change and passed it across the counter. "This is yours now, officially and fully," she said. I held the paper in my hand, a simple document, but it felt like the final thread pulling loose from everything that had held me down for so long. On the way home, I passed the old neighborhood. I didn't stop, but I slowed down as I drove by. The house looked smaller than I remembered, dimmer, forgotten. A "for rent" sign had been hammered into the front yard. I wasn't sure who had placed it, maybe a property manager Ms. Jackson had referred me to. Maybe a new phase was already beginning. I didn't feel revenge. I felt release. At home, Emery was already sitting at the kitchen table, crayons scattered across the surface. She jumped up when I walked in. "Look what I made," she said, handing me a new drawing. It was us again, standing in the backyard, a garden behind us, and above our heads the words "Home" in big, careful letters. I pinned it next to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a paw print. That evening I called Elaine to thank her again. "You saved me," I said. "No, honey," she replied. "You saved yourself." I just pointed a flashlight where it was dark. That night I read Emery a bedtime story. As I tucked her in, she looked up and asked, "What happens if they try to come back?" "They won't," I said. "And if they do, we know what to do now." She nodded and closed her eyes. I sat beside her for a while, watching her breathe. We were safe, and this time we both knew it. Spring came early that year. The mornings were still cool, but the light felt different, less gray, more golden. Emery had started waking up before her alarm, eager to get dressed, pack her snack, and run to the bus stop with her backpack bouncing behind her. Her drawings had changed too. Less red, more green, more flowers, more suns. I started noticing the changes in myself too. I no longer jumped when the doorbell rang. I didn't flinch at raised voices in public. I stopped rehearsing excuses in my head every time I spent money on myself. There was space in my life now, space for stillness, space to breathe, space to heal. I signed up for therapy. The first session was awkward. I wasn't used to being listened to without judgment. But over time, I found the words. I talked about the guilt, the pressure, the way family had been used like a chain around my neck. I talked about the fear I'd swallowed every time my father's footsteps echoed down the hallway, about the shame I carried for not standing up sooner, and the relief that I finally had. Emery's therapist said she was adjusting well, that she was learning how to name her feelings, even the scary ones. One day after a session, she turned to me and said, "I know it wasn't my fault. What happened?" My throat tightened. I nodded, unable to speak. "I know it wasn't yours either," she added. I pulled her into a hug, held her until she wriggled free, and ran to show me her latest painting. It was of our new backyard, the lavender bush, our porch, a picnic blanket, and two smiling faces. The deputy called a week later to confirm the restraining order had been extended. "No contact allowed, no exceptions," he said. "Let us know if anything changes." "Thank you," I said. I meant it. I received a few more messages from distant relatives, some supportive, some vague, a few angry. I didn't respond to most. I wasn't interested in defending myself anymore. Some truths don't need to be explained to people who are determined not to see them. I heard from someone that my parents and Trevor had moved into a small apartment above a closed nail salon in a strip mall across town. The rent was cheap, the heating barely worked. Trevor had been rejected from another job. My mother was asking around for help. Isolde, the cousin they once adored and praised endlessly, had stopped answering their calls. But I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't need them to suffer. I just needed them gone. And now they were. One Saturday morning, Emery and I sat on the porch with mugs of warm tea. She was brushing her elephant's ears gently with an old toothbrush, humming under her breath. "Mommy," she said, glancing up, "we're really safe now, right?" I looked at her, at the soft glow of the sun catching in her hair, at the lavender swaying beside her feet, at her elephant now clean and fluffed. "Yes, honey," I said. "We're safe." She smiled, a slow, content smile, then went back to brushing. I watched her for a long moment, then looked out at the street. It was quiet. No threats, no manipulation, no one trying to shame me into obedience, just the breeze and the sky and the peace I had fought for. I stood up and walked inside, the screen door creaking behind me. In the kitchen, the drawing still hung on the fridge, the old one of me on the floor, blood on my face, and the new one, us in a garden hand in hand smiling. I didn't take the old one down. It was a reminder of where we had been, of how far we had come. I poured another cup of tea, sat back on the porch, and let the warmth sink into my palms. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was ready for it because I had learned something I wished I'd known sooner. Family is not who shares your blood. Family is who protects your peace, and the peace I'd built with my daughter. That was real. That was ours. That was enough.